Lightning like Steve McQueen. I'm in the fast lane when the light turns green. And I built tough, I ain't nothing but grit. Cause I made rugged blood, sweat, and spit. Yeah, like a horse I fly. Better push yourself in for a bumpy ride. I like to play hard, but I work harder. And I weather the storm cause I'm built stronger.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines, but most importantly, provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak with transportation professionals, because at the end of the day, you guys, I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve, so you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. We're just going to jump right in, you guys. I got a very special guest coming on the show. You know, he's been in the industry for a very long time. He's been on multiple sides of it in technology. Literally since the first time I met him back in like 2021, technology has been like the thing that he is all about. So with that being said, I got my man Kurtis Tryber back on the show. Or this might even be your first time. No, you were on.
I've been on before.
Yeah, that's right. Dude, it's been a while, man. It's like,
yeah,
I've already got like over 1,000 episodes out now. So it's kind of like, when were you on?
I think I was in the single digits or the potential double digits.
Yeah, dude, it's been quite some time, man. But dude, it's been a journey, and I know you've been out there, building, and I remember the first time we met and it was in Vegas, and you and your brother were talking about how like we got this idea and we're gonna build this out because like literally every shipper we've ever talked to needs technology, and this is what we're going to run with.
Yeah. It was at that time. It was like right before we started the start of Exo Freight.
Yeah.
Or I think we were I think we had the brokerage running, but we hadn't transformed into Exo Freight yet. That's what it was. Yeah, exactly. And so we had like version 1 of the platform built, which was, janky at best, right? But like did some cool initial things to give us like a good traction. And then obviously that evolved, pretty rapidly over the next, that was probably 2021. So probably three and a half years, right? Yeah. No, that was cool. I remember that. That's a lifetime ago. Lots of things were different back then.
Dude, it was. And, and I remember, because I saw here, it was recently that when I had reached out, because I had saw that, you guys are kind of coming out with something new here. And, like what I love is more of like, dude, it's just the evolution of things when you go out there and you start doing something, right? Because I think like, you can probably attest to this more than some, where it's like, man, you start something in one direction and then the market dictates it as you kind of go, and you're like, hey, actually, I think this is where the real opportunity is going to lie. And this is where my heart is. Right. And I think like, that's where, like ultimately you don't know anybody, anything, right? Like you got to go after what you want to build. And you've kind of been down this road before where you're like, hey, I think this is where the greater opportunity or whatever opportunity you guys see fit for your company is going to be best suited for you guys.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think that every business I've always started just happens to be in a recession, like of some kind, or like some weird black swan event. And so the first like freight brokerage I started was like right after the financial crisis. Right. And it was like, what a time to start a business, and we rode a good train because it was like all up and to the right from the financial crisis to like the pandemic essentially. Right. And then like when we started Exo Freight, we were also kind of coming out of another black swan event. It was like COVID pandemic era. And, honestly, it was, the way that I thought about it was not like, hey, here's a swan event we can ride, but like starting that business, we actually started it before that happened. So that just happened like, on accident or what, it just, just something that came up, but like, it gave us like a really big boost, which was awesome. But you never want to build a business on the back of something that's going to be artificially, inflating your business. But, I didn't have that intuition. I said, hey, like supply chain always exists, like freight always moves, like no matter what day of the week it is or what's happening in the real, in the world, Like this is a business that will live forever.
Yeah.
And, I think like over the next 2 years, what we realized was, there was a little bit of artificial inflation there. Maybe not all of the business, right? But like there was growth that we thought was because of the things we were doing, which were actually not, because it actually had nothing to do with us at all. And then, sort of on the tail end of that, there was never a time when that business was not growing, but there was a time when that business started to grow a lot slower.
Yeah.
And that was sort of like, you put a bunch of resources into a train that's moving really fast. And as the train slows down, you can't always, pull the coal out of the train quick enough to slow it down. You've already kind of juiced the fire. And yeah, to your point, like the market sort of dictated, back in, well, really since like mid 2022 or 2023, freight brokerage is fundamentally changing in a way that, things are being tight, business is still there, but volume is not there. And how do you navigate that? And I mean, the answer, cut costs. Yeah. That's the only way to solve that. And, then the other side of it is, you kind of go through a soul searching mission there of like, to your point, like, is this what we really set out to be? Right. And so, the market does dictate, where, it's changing all the time, right? Not just in freight brokerage, but just in the world, right? Like every market sort of is telling you something. And if you listen, there's opportunity. If you don't listen, you might fall off a cliff and not even realize it, right?
Yeah. And I think that, everybody goes through that though, right, Kurtis? Like I think that, and I've actually been talking kind of about this a lot recently, because I feel like entrepreneurship and a lot of stuff gets kind of overly glorified out there, and how it's just easy and everything else. And, the reality is going to catch up with you at some point in time, right? Whether it's, holy shit, I'm over my head, or damn, these people owe me a lot of money, or that person did something that they said that they were. And, there's a lot of stuff in, and that's why it's like, I kind of talk about that, like change is the only constant, right? And especially now, everything that's going on at the port, everybody's a port expert and a labor union expert out there on social media. So it's just like, kind of what do you do and where it is. And I think like it's always, you got to make sure, like, is this something I actually want to do? Is this something I want to continue to pursue? Because like it's expensive, right? Like, this is another narrative out there that it's just free to become a millionaire, right? Like it costs a lot of money and everything else, right? So, you got to go through it, and then you got to make those pivots, and you got to actually, because like, and I was actually talking about this on the show. I think it was last week, where I'm like, there are no set processes when you start a business. You have to create them, right? So it's
every single one.
Yeah, dude, you're going down a certain lane. You're like, fuck, this isn't working anymore. Now we got to blow it up and kind of start all over. Like, yeah, the framework's still there, but how you get there changes, right? So it's like, I think, that's kind of what I'm feeling you're saying here is, it's like, hey, we started off with one thing, and then we realized like, hey, this probably isn't going to be what we want to do. And then like ultimately, and then you brought up the whole point about soul searching, like, is this something I actually want to commit to every single day, 16, 18 hours a day at times, whatever that looks like. And, ultimately you find, it seems like you kind of found your thing now and where you wanted to go with it. And what's funny is when I saw Pulse come out, and I'm like, dude, this is exactly what Kurtis and his brother were saying that they were going to do
like 4 years ago.
And now here we are. So it was kind of wild.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like it's not free to be a millionaire. It doesn't only take money, but to your other point is like it takes absolute like conviction that a lot of people have never felt before, and it takes more mind share than you can imagine and even wrap your head around. Like you have to think about these things. Again, you always see like the really successful things that people do. They wake up at 3 a.m. every day. They run 17 miles. Like, okay, aside from all of that, like one thing that they all do is they think about the thing they're doing, the business that they're building, like 100% of the time, every single day, 365 days a year. Like that's really what people are talking about. And that's like, that's like the dark side of entrepreneurship, is you sort of like, you're devoting a lot of mind share that could be, maybe you're sacrificing on the family side or this side, right? But like there is a massive sacrifice there. But anyway, so like it got to the point, like, as we thought about like, what do we want to be and what do we want to build? Like, ultimately technology is where my path, my heart's always been. And why we set out to build what we originally started to build was we wanted to help shippers solve a core problem. Right. And it was, at the time, it was this open deck need, where shippers just didn't really have a great solution there. And like, we filled the gap, and we did it well, like up until the point that we decided not to anymore, honestly. But now with Pulse, like what we're also seeing is like the way to help these people could be, on just the servicing side of it. And so you're sort of one of many service providers, and maybe you can, sort of put yourself a small percentage ahead of the next guys, and maybe that's valuable to them. But as we started talking to, either like current customers of EXO, and then like even just new, customers that we'd never worked with.
Yeah.
It was pretty clear that like a lot of these people, or a lot of these companies, the logistics department is like the thing that nobody wants to like open the door to. Like, it's just like over there on the backside of the building. And like, we just don't think about it. But like at the end of the month, the CFO and, the people that care about the numbers, now all of a sudden they care for like one day. Right.
Yeah.
And if the numbers are good, like, hey, we beat budget, like life is good. But the second we don't beat budget, it's like all of a sudden this like massive chaos, like this fire of like, what's happening? Why are rates getting expensive? Like, why is our transportation blowing up? Like, what? It's like, and these people are sort of blindsided by it, like every day. It's like, well, hold on, you haven't cared for the last 28 days of this month, or the last 60, 70 days of this quarter. Now you're coming to me like, what do you want me to do? Like, it's already happened. Right. We could have strategic conversations if you want, but like, you didn't want to do that at the end of the first part of the quarter. You only want to do it at the end. And so, we looked at this and like, I mean, I'm sure you heard this a lot, like when you were on the brokering side, like, I have one customer that is near and dear to my heart. They were an early EXO customer. They have always been with us. He's a friend in the real life, through this whole journey. Yeah. And he's like the number one shipper that gets this every day. His office is right, literally like down the hall from the CEO's office. They're a very large company, in the tunes of hundreds of millions in revenue. And, he's the guy that has no tools. He's got spreadsheets and email.
Yeah.
And if things are good, nobody bugs him. The second one thing explodes, it is World War III. He's on the brink of losing his job because the guy is so upset that they, overspent, or, something got stolen or damaged or what have you. Right. And, the point is like, as I had some of those conversations, it's like, well, I think there's going to be a lot of service providers that can help these customers, and there will be always new ones. There will be people entering and leaving the market. I wanted to sit in their office. I wanted to go up a level and sit with these folks and say, like, let's talk about what's really happening. Let's actually give you some tools and provide some insight into the things that you're actually doing every day, so that, rather than being sort of this dark room that nobody opens, like, I want you to create value within your company. Yeah. I want you to proactively be able to walk into that end of month, end of quarter meeting and say, look how awesome we did. Here it is. Yeah. Right. Like I want you to have that power to where people say, like, man, that's a really valuable part of our business because this guy's like leveling us up. Yeah. And, I think I want to really be a part of that story for a lot of these people. And even in the small part of the journey we've been on so far, we've built a lot of awesome technology over the last 4 years. Like Pulse is not new. Like, I've been building a TMS for, since 2020. And so now we're just taking all the problems that we had as brokers and using a lot of that technology for them. And it's like super useful. Right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And so like with this, are you guys able to, because like Pulse is a shipper TMS, are you guys able to like integrate with a broker's TMS at that point where it's like, that's how, instead of, I think the best way to put it, how most people have send out EDI tenders right now, right? Where now this just instantly, is there like an API connection that Pulse can have into, Thai TMS or something like that, and have send all that and transfer all that data over that way?
Yeah, we're actually working on a couple of those integrations right now with some of the some of our customers. have onboarded their carriers and brokers, and shocker, most of our customers actually work with brokers, not actual carriers, which is fine. Because they're the service providers that will usually have some of that like elevated tech.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly right. Like, if, we've got a few customers that do sort of the high volume contract stuff. Right. And so, as those tenders go through the waterfall guide, they actually EDI, a 204 tender out to their TMS for accept, reject. I mean, very, very similar workflow that we would have had at Exo Freight with an enterprise shipper that we had worked with.
No, definitely. And I like what you brought up there about the data aspect of it as well, and kind of like showing because like that's one thing that I always think about is like, all right, how do we make somebody's transportation department like a clear line profit center, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
How can they show that in there? And because like I am brokering again. I don't know, it's been a while since we connected, but
what? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so like we're doing that, and that's one of our biggest things when we're sitting down with people and having meetings with them, because a lot of them are always like, I'm not a transportation company, I'm a manufacturer, right? Like we build this, like that's why we work with.
I don't really want to do this thing over here.
Yeah.
But
And that's one of those things where it's like, as a broker, my biggest value proposition is I want to show a clear ROI every time they move one of their products out. Because same thing, man. Like we do a lot of open deck freight, so it is not as consistent as bottled water loads and stuff like that, right? So it's like they build this one machine, send it out to their customer. Well, now we want to make sure that every single time they buy another machine, they go back to our customer due to the service, communication, everything, that they're like, damn, not only was it great to buy this machine, the transportation of it was even better. They were communicated. They let us know all of that stuff. So we want to have that direct line item that goes back to them, where we can show where it's like, hey, when you started working with us, there's a clear upward trajectory of orders and repeat orders based on the shipments that we move for you.
Yeah. And like, whether they're showing you everything or not, I'll tell you what one thing I have seen now that I've sort of, moved my position in the value chain a bit. So the doors have opened and the conversations have been a little more open. Every shipper that I've talked to, right, they are tracking this. There is very much a sort of P&L that, and whether it's a spreadsheet or what have you, like they are tracking this sort of, what did we charge our customer for shipping, like them, right? So they sold a product. What do they charge the customer for shipping? Then there's sort of this, what did we pay a carrier to ship it? And there's sort of, they don't always call it margin, right? It is a bucket of money that gets generated, but it's, one of our customers, they use that money for like, if the product gets delivered and something's damaged, well, as an offering, they say, hey, we'll bring it back and ship you another one for free.
Yeah.
And so that margin that they create, like those are for those opportunities to make sure they have like a really good customer experience, but to your point on turning it into a, sort of a profit center and ROI, like they are tracking that and it is important to them, but they're not always like telling the broker that information. Right. And it's vital. If you knew, you're like, hey man, just tell me like, what's the whole picture here? Like I can actually support you in a really interesting way. If I know where you need to be, I can absolutely make us as a team help you get there. Right.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of folks that I see is like, they don't really even have the tools to get that full picture. Right. So I'll give you like another example. We've got a customer that they're in the heavy machinery sort of equipment space. And, over the years, he's sort of had to build in this margin. Right. But he doesn't, he's trying to track every shipment on a spreadsheet. He's trying to really get down to the nitty gritty of it. But the way that their CFO sort of looks at it is just like a lagging P&L, right? So he'll get the P&L at the end of the month, and then he's got to kind of go match up all these transactions. But, keep in mind, it's like not real time. Like the transactions he's looking at are happening now, that the P&L happened, 30, 60 days ago. So it's kind of this like, science experiment at the end of every month, that is challenging, right? So it seems like, if we can sort of, from our perspective, if we can sort of help these people, nobody's like giving them the path to create these like spreadsheets and these like how to report on it. They're all like sort of making it up as they go. And there's no class on this, and there's no like industry discussion among sort of logistics planners that are saying like, hey, this is how you should do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like there's an opportunity for us to sort of, talk to even the shippers like you were talking about, like go into them and have that conversation of like, hey, look, yes, you could use a TMS and, maybe it's really easy just emailing carriers, but like, that's not really the point. The point is like your email is not giving you the accurate reporting to sort of have these more strategic conversations. That's actually the reason why you're using a TMS. Everybody can email a tender, like that can just happen. Right.
I was going to say, what's some of the biggest things that, having the experience that you have as a broker, you've built up technology, you've built up, I mean, back in the day too, you were also on the tech side of things. When you're going down there and you're talking to shippers, what's some of like the biggest things that they're almost surprised of what like actually goes on from a broker's perspective when you're trying to like organize freight for them or anything like that? Because like when you're going in there and you're bringing them technology, and technology isn't necessarily synonymous on the, on that side of the industry. So it's like, what are some of the biggest things where it's almost like an aha moment, like, holy shit, we were actually doing this for so long. And now with this TMS that you're bringing into us, like we had no idea that that was even an option.
So I'll give you one really simple example that's not even, that just happens because we have a conversation, right? It's not so much because of our software. It kind of is, right? So this is like a really tiny example, and then I'll give you like a really powerful, like bigger example.
Yeah.
The tiny example is, shippers don't, it's not that I don't want to say this in a negative, like they don't actually know as much as you think they do.
Mm-hmm. I know what you mean.
Yeah, what I mean by that is like, I'll give you like the simple example, in our system, if you want to invite your carriers, you need their MC number or DOT number, right? Very simple, right? I've got a customer that says, I feel like I shouldn't be asking them for that number because I feel like it's something that, is theirs and it's like, special and hidden. And I'm like, no, exact opposite. You need to ask for this because if they don't have it like that, you know what I mean? Like there could be all sorts of red flags. So I think there's a aha moment of like, shippers don't know everything that you think they might. So as brokers, information, like don't think it's like, oh, everybody knows this, right?
Correct.
Like,
yeah.
Feel free to educate a little bit, right?
Yeah. I think a good example for me is like, it was hours of service. It was like DOT inspection week, stuff like little things that we kind of think like everybody knows. That's actually the exact opposite. And it takes, as a transportation professional, you need to go out there and educate people in a meaningful way, right? Like,
don't be like an asshole about it, right?
Yeah,
but just like,
absolutely. This is what's going on. Here's why it's going on. Capacity's tight, and it's going to tighten up in a couple of weeks, and here's why.
Yep. So that's like a small example. Like as I have conversations with shippers, like there is an opportunity to educate them on the other side of the fence, even though I'm not there currently, but it's good to be able to bridge some of the knowledge gap. The other big opportunity that has happened, right? This sort of aha moment. Kind of coming back to an earlier point you made about sort of even a profit center. We've got one customer, again, and I don't know if this is like the dark side of it or not, but like there is, again, I kind of talked about some of that margin that gets created between, what they're paying a carrier and what they're charging a customer for shipping. The aha moment that I've seen, at least with a lot of our early customers, is by enabling them to have a system, they're able to accurately make sure they make that number every time. Mm-hmm. Right. As before, it's been kind of I think I made it on this one, but I might have lost it on this one. And like, it'll all shake out at the end of the month. We've had customers able to, line by line, minute to minute, every load that goes out the door, track in real time, like, excellent. We are on track to hit this sort of target that we have at the end of the month. And so it gives them sort of this, like, I don't want to say like, maybe like a little bit of a pain reliever, a little bit of a stress reliever. Yeah. It gives them like something, a goal to work towards the month, rather than sort of putting on a blindfold, working through the month and then taking it off and kind of seeing how they did. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the big aha moment. And like the word, how I get to that is like the words that people say is like, hey, before, my job was every day I come in, I've got salespeople coming to me asking, I got a deal I'm working on. What's it going to cost to ship this from A to B, right? And there's a lot of that happens. Like, part of
Tons.
these people, these logistics folks that you speak to, it's not that they didn't want to give you the load. It's that it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
And I think a lot of that's especially in the open deck world too, right? Like a lot of it is like, hey, we're bidding out this precast concrete project 6 months from now. We just need a general idea, right? And that's what, because a few of my customers, Curtis, that's what they said. They're like, hey man, just give us a ballpark. Like, we know it could go up, it could go down.
Right.
We just need something to toss out for our bid.
Yeah. And that's kind of the point, is like, one of the things that we've been able to do, again, we've got a customer in a smaller realm, like there, in a smaller piece of that, where it's like, hey, we've got somebody that's interested in buying this large machine.
Mm-hmm.
They're kicking the tires now, but we have to give them landed cost. We've actually rolled, our like pulse out to the sales guys. So
wow.
like they're actually getting their own like over-dimensional, like full truckload, like these, heavy machines that you're shipping. They're actually getting the quote for customers, like while they're on the phone, taking that sort of sales call, if you will. And so it's actually enabling like a customer, like this is sort of back to that aha moment.
Yeah.
They're actually closing deals faster. And these are sales guys. Like, they don't want to know anything about transportation. They don't need to know anything about transportation, but what they can do is they know where their equipment's at. They know where their customer's at, and they've got some very general dimensions, and they can ballpark it. Right.
Yeah.
And they can take that information and like put a deal in front of a customer, like on the phone, rather than calling them back. And like, the outcome is they make more money, they close more deals.
Correct.
The sort of downstream effect is the transportation person is not bogged down as sort of this quote vending machine. He's able to be strategic and actually work on making sure the deals that already close, making sure they get delivered and on time, and sort of that customer experience that you're talking about. And so it's just sort of like bridging some of the gaps inside of these companies. And basically the outcome is a lot of these people are saying, like, we're just thinking about it a totally different way now. Like, this is just a different motion, which is great. It's like a positive step forward.
I think that some of the biggest misconceptions that a lot of brokers might have, and again, this is just my opinion based on like what I see people post out there, is like, they don't think that their customers or shippers have competition, and that like there's anybody else out there. Like, there's only one
guy making rebar,
one guy making fucking shingles and all that. Like, they just think that, right? So it's like, dude, and I think like once you actually, if you're a sales rep, and you're a broker or you're in freight sales, and you start thinking like a business owner, you start thinking at the fact that all of these companies have competition out there and they're all bidding against each other, right? Like, we're so consumed with freight that we think we're the only fucking industry on the face of this earth. And, but when you're out there and you think that way, right? Like, that speed is everything. And what you're delivering, to that sales staff for those companies, Curtis, that speed, they're like, hey, again, we just need to know a ballpark of what this might cost to move that. Dude, that's going to help them get out even more quotes. And as you know, man, you've sold for a long time. It's a volume game. Sales is volume. You need to get in front of as many people as possible. And you also need to be able to provide that information that your customers or your prospects are requesting in that moment. And if you can't, somebody else will.
Totally. And that's like, to your point, as you mentioned, as you're like a broker kind of working upstream, being able to, if you can, right? Sometimes, folks want to hold stuff close to the chest, but I mean, if you can have a conversation like that with a customer of like, hey, I can get you as many freight rates as you want. I can get you as many trucks as you want. I can make sure all this stuff works out really well. Let's go one step higher. What are the actual goals here? Right.
Yeah.
And a short story, a story that happens to me often, or happened to me often as a broker, large company that I work with, very, very close with. Sometimes he'll come to me, or he would have come to me as a broker and said, hey, my sales guy botched this deal. Like, he underbid freight on 100 of these machines we're shipping out, dump trucks or what have you. I need you to accomplish this for as close or at, below this number as possible. Right. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, you've set the stage for we can be successful knowing that information. I actually can do a lot with that as like a broker. And so you've got your goal to beat a number here. I know exactly sort of where I'm playing with. I have a timeline I can work with. Like, we can make that sales guy and ultimately the end customer happy now that we know exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
Not if I didn't have that relationship or wouldn't be able to ask some of those questions, as sort of the upstream piece of that, like you might be scrambling, you might be overpaying for trucks, you might be doing like crazy things on your side to meet goals that are like kind of made up in your head, right?
Yeah.
Like, so there's always like that opportunity. I think just if you can, you go a little upstream, you figure out, some of the goals of the business, like you said, think like a business owner. And it can be really successful. And like I said, that's where I think, us where we sit today, like that kind of gives us the open opportunity to have that conversation.
Yeah.
And hopefully, I think what that'll turn into is just smarter decisions and maybe just moving the industry at 1 inch forward. It's a big rock we're all moving here. It doesn't move quickly, but I think that's always been a goal of mine, is like make the industry slightly better with everything that I try to do.
Oh man, I love it. Kurtis, I'm gonna have to have you back on, man. We keep shows at the 30-minute mark. And I know you got a big day ahead of you here, man. But we'll have you back on for sure. But how does it mean to reach out to you to find out more about what you got going on now?
Yeah, so just Kurtis at shipperpulse.com. Website is shipperpulse.com. You can reach me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. I'm on LinkedIn every day posting. We're trying to build in public, so you'll see a lot of stuff happening, coming up here over the next couple of months.
Dude, absolutely, man. Kurtis, I love it. And if you guys can't find Kurtis for whatever reason, you guys can always reach out to me. I'll put you guys in direct contact with them. But speaking of, shipper everything, we got a shipper coming on tomorrow, you guys. So if you guys have any sales or operations related questions for for him, drop them in the chat, DM them over to me. No, you cannot solicit his business, but he is here to offer guidance on the show live for you guys. As always, if you guys got value in what you heard, subscribe to the show, you guys. Share it out there to your network, because if you see value, your network's going to see value as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. And we'll be talking to you soon.